Hey, what's up, you guys? Michael here from the Proper Form Podcast. This is technically my first episode with a guest and our second episode on the podcast. I've got Jonathan Angulo here. He is, first off, I want to go over a few things. He is a child of God. He's a husband. He's a father. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this as we get going on this podcast. But he is a wealth builder. Some of us might see that as maybe a little bit of fluff on something that is described on something that's not so fun to maybe be kind of titled as, but I'm really excited to dive deeper into this. But Jonathan, I appreciate you being here, man. Thanks
Brother,
for
I
joining.
appreciate you having me, and congrats on the podcast. This is huge.
Yes, so please definitely bear with me as we are getting this thing going. You guys don't see, I discussed this on the previous episode, but this space would not look like this if it was for me. If it was for me, it'd probably be like on two iPhones and shaky hands. Michael Child is the magic behind the mission here for the Proper Form Podcast. We've got the camera set up. We're here in this conference room that's in my office. These walls here, this 3D printing wall, I actually got for our private studio for luxury lifestyle training and was going to be behind our front desk. Well, that space isn't even there anymore. So just kind of ironic how these things literally collected dust for almost 2 years because they came in so late. But I think, God
You're resourceful, man. It was ready.
Had a different plan to use it. So we've kind of used this, and this space really helps add to so much more than just a conference space. It's a space where we can retreat here and be on the podcast. But so I want to dive into it as we set the tone for the podcast. A huge desire from my heart is I want these to be in person. I want this to be where not only I can build a relationship and just dive deeper into learning more from the people that I interview, that I look up to with who they are as men and women, fathers, husbands, all of those things, moms, daughters, entrepreneurs, the things that they're pursuing. I want to be able to really selfishly and rightfully learn and grow myself. I love being around people that are hungry and on mission to do their passions. We'll dive deeper into passion a little bit here. But man, I would love if you would share a little bit of what we described, of some things that kind of list who you are, of a child of God, a husband, a father. I'm sure those are maybe purposely put in place in that. Could you dive a little bit deeper?
In that order, too. So First, I want to say, man, I respect you so much and respect everything that you've built over the last few years. And I think that's really where we've connected. And we've had several meetings, coffee shop meetings, and we're friends first. But ultimately, I just respect you as an entrepreneur and everything that you've gone out and built, because it takes a risk to be able to do those things. And as we both kind of walked through that together, it's been fun to learn from each other, successes and mistakes, right? And to share that and to be vulnerable with each other. But through that, we're both men of faith, child of God.
Yeah.
And that's the first and foremost thing that's most important for us is what we're doing going to echo in eternity? Is what we're doing going to make an impact? Because if at the end of the day, all we're doing is bringing a paycheck and leaving it there, then what's the point? Yeah. Anybody can make a paycheck, but what are we doing with it? So that's most important. And then I'm a husband. So that comes second. Yeah. And then I'm a father. So I've got 2 little girls, and that's extremely important to me. And I know that you're a dad as well. And then lastly, I say that I'm a wealth builder, but I'm a mortgage advisor. The technical title is loan officer. We talked a little bit about that, but a loan officer is somebody who's out there just selling loans. And I think that's the low-hanging fruit in the industry. And what I like to do is challenge people to think a little bit differently, because it's the things that we didn't learn in school. How do we take it to the next level and have you build wealth, generational wealth for yourself, and get you out of just paying your bills and buying a house, because it's more than just that.
Yeah. Dude, there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to come back to the few things you just mentioned at the end, but kind of bringing it back to the front. As a husband and father, you've got beautiful bride, 2 beautiful girls. I get to see them every once in a while. They go to Sophie, my wife, is the hairstylist, and gets their hair done right by.
Yeah, they've been seeing Sophie for years, so it's been kind of cool to see her move around in different spaces. But now she works here. You got a space for her with LLT, which is awesome.
Yeah, big kind of family affair there of just it just kind of made sense. We had an additional space that we just kicked out a wall a little bit further. A lot of their clients are our clients, and again, just kind of going back to that collectiveness and intentional relationships, and being definitely not a one-stop shop, but in the sense of being able to offer one less excuse of having to move around and bounce around. It's funny. It's come to the point now where like I'll have appointments adjust their training appointment with me because they've got a hair appointment with Sophie, and
That's
I'm
so
like,
cool.
whoa, dude, this is what the heck. But I get it. Hair appointments, it's huge, super important. But I wanted to touch on something, and I kind of write down some things as I go because I want to make sure
Yeah.
I don't forget. But you touched on the difference between working for a paycheck versus working for a bigger kind of kingdom minded mindset.
Mm.
And then as you go into wealth builder and really it's you're a loan officer, but
Yeah.
like you add so much more value to people. And I think there's of course a passion and drive there. Like you could just close loans and be done and not be relational and just do the next one on your desk. But could you dive a little bit deeper on the difference you've seen in your journey as an entrepreneur and a believer, and how you have really paired your work with the passion of a kingdom mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, uh, man, so 2 years ago, I was crushing it, top of my game. And what I realized was, well, I didn't realize it at the time. It took a life changing event that was forced upon me to start over.
Mm,
And I was top 1% in the country. Nobody knew my name, but I was top dog,
yeah.
right? And
Wow.
I was making good money and it was great. And what I didn't realize was the amount of pride that I had in that because I was successful.
Mm,
By the world's terms, I was extremely successful.
yeah.
We would take my family on vacations. We'd bring my parents on vacations. We would bless people and give to them because we thought we were doing it out of the goodness of our hearts. But when that
Mm,
life change came, it was extremely humbling,
yeah.
having to start over from scratch. And what I realized was that we had this success put on a pedestal. And even though we were saved and we were doing the right things, we were
Yeah.
going to church, we were raising our kids and doing what we needed to, there were things that had a hold on us that we didn't realize. And
Yeah.
so it took that complete humbling. And I referenced Job. My brother says Job's for the jobless. So if you're jobless, go ahead and read Job.
Yeah.
But it took me reading that to realize there's a verse where Job says, hey, God, I came into this world naked. I'm going to leave naked. Everything else in between, you're still God. And
Mm,
I was like, man, I read that when everything went down a few years ago. And I was like, okay, I need to do this differently this second time
yeah.
around. I've got a second chance to rebuild. And it's been a tough 2 years to rebuild. But through the success, every success that comes, now it's out of a position of humility and knowing that it's for God and for the kingdom rather than just for myself.
Yeah. Dang, that's super good. And I won't forget when back in I think we talked a little bit before we started on the podcast here today when you and I met at the Starbucks over off 380 and Lake Forest
Yeah,
by that Chick-fil-A kind of new area in that Kroger, and we had a coffee. I think you gave me some beef for the sweet coffee that I was drinking, and I think I mentioned that I'm getting into my coffee vibe, trying to get
right.
less sweet and creamer in there. But it was a pivotal time of when like I was getting my studio up and launching. I can't remember exactly if we were in the studio yet, but I remember
You were just building it out.
there was a lot of
Yeah,
stress
yeah,
and kind of just tension in that. And you had just kind of made your move on going on your own, and the market was kind of just all over the place. Going off of kind of where you were, top 1% to kind of that just pivotal changing moment of what you thought success was versus with that lens, how has that shaped the lens of what success defines to you now?
success used to be a number. So for me, it was if I've got this number, I have a seat at the table,
Mm,
right? If
yeah,
I hit that number, I'm successful, people know me, and I'm making a difference.
yeah,
And then it took losing all of that to realize, okay, what's actually important? So one was my relationship with God. Then two is definitely my relationship with my wife. We're closer now than we've ever been before. And then
mm,
three was my relationship with my kids and my responsibility to not only raise good humans, but also how am I going to impact their life for eternity? How do I raise them
yeah,
up the right way? So looking at everything through that lens, now it's okay, how does success look? Is it hitting that number? Because I could hit that number again, right? I know that if I
yeah,
build over time, I could hit that number, but the trade offs are going to be now I have a massive team again, and I don't have the time available like I used to during
mm,
this slow time. So, what I've cherished during the slow
yeah,
time is okay, I can invest in my kids, I can invest in my wife, I can invest in my relationships. how do I do that and be successful? So now the number's different. I've lowered the threshold on a number of what success looks like because
Yeah.
to me that's a healthy lifestyle. So some people
Yeah.
are out there and they're like, "Oh, I'm at the office at 5:30 in the morning and I'm grinding." I'm like, "Cool. If that works for you, awesome." But for me, success looks like, can I go on a walk in the middle of the day with my wife? Can I go to the gym if I want to in the middle of the day?
Mm.
Can I be at every one of my kids' soccer games? That's
Yeah.
success to me.
Nice. Yeah. And Um, dude, that definitely is a little bit of a hit for me for sure. Like it just being in the hustle every day, and you know the the desire to grow a business and want to do it well, but also the sacrifices that have to be made for that. And there's times that we're getting home late. I actually doing some branding with a guy in Australia, and the other night we had a meeting at 9 p.m. because it's in the morning his time. So I helped be with the boys a little bit after dinner, do their bath, and Sophie put them down. But like that's one extra night I wasn't able to put them down. How would you encourage someone that is in kind of the grind of trying to grow something and really like understanding? I think people get that it's not for the short term. Like you're not just doing what you're doing to just like make the short term game to get back to the number where you're at. This is a long term play. This is a marathon. So how would you encourage someone that is kind of in the hustle and bustle of the grind? Time is all of our enemies in ways. Um, how would you just encourage them to like try to define and set boundaries or parameters on that success for them?
And that's so hard because I'm not perfect at it. I mess
Yeah.
up. We try to protect Sundays and say that's our Sabbath, and I try not to work at all during those days, which actually that's been extremely helpful. Set aside a day because if God built the house or built the world in 6 days
Yeah.
and rested, can I rest for a day? Absolutely, and I should. We should respect
Yeah.
it, right? It's one of the commandments.
Yeah.
So respect the Sabbath. So for us, it's been very intentional to do that. We read a book by Garden John Mark Comer, Garden
Okay.
City. Game changer. I
Really?
highly
You
recommend that book.
guys read it together?
We read it together. We actually had a book club because we're old,
Okay.
so we do a
There you
book
go.
club where everybody bring your favorite meal, read the book, get together. But Garden City was a game changer for us, and actually happened right
Huh.
after or right before COVID. So then we
Really?
were forced to respect the Sabbath, right? But I
Yeah.
still mess up.
Yeah.
Work happens, especially as you're building something, and I think you can't take all that stress upon yourself like, man, I failed today because I wasn't with my kids. I think if you're extremely intentional when you're with them, which I'm also bad at, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Like it's,
Yeah.
it's all new to all of us, but have something that you intentionally set aside for them and then try to make the days or the times that you're with them as
Hmm.
intentional as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. The boys just recently, Jeremiah and Josiah, my two boys, recently just helped Sophie do some chores or something around the house, and she like paid them a couple quarters or something, and just opened up this whole like, oh, we're trying to kind of gently.
Yeah.
They're 4 and 3 years old. Like teach them like, hey, this is how mommy and daddy buy things and the toys you want. And so we just started a small little like plastic jar,
Love
and they
that.
can do some things around the house. And I'm like, I don't know if you've ever seen a video of Shaq, where one of his kids is walking through his house, and they walk in with food, and they were trying to hide it from him. And he chases them down and grabs the food and then takes a bite. He's like, "This is the dad tax."
Wow.
And I thought that was so funny. And still to this day, it might, if I'm being honest, looking at myself in the mirror, it might be an excuse for me to like take a bite of their food when really I shouldn't, because I don't need those extra calories.
Stop, dude.
But talking in the sense of like just trying to teach them some foundational like understanding of money.
Yeah.
And how to do that. My grandpa is actually from up in Indiana. I spoke to him this past weekend. Him and my grandma on my mom's side are coming down into town here in the next week. And I called him because he's an amazing wood crafter, woodworker. He owned his own lumber company back in the day, very
That's cool.
successful. The gifts that he has with his hands to build things is insane. And so we're actually going to build a like lemonade stand, but we're going to call it J&J Snack Shack,
Love it.
and like sell some snacks and stuff and drinks and some things like that. Maybe come up to one of the workouts on a Saturday and like give out some post workout checks or
Yeah.
something, and just teach them that. So how would you compare in a sense like that? For me, if I'm being honest, I had a great upbringing with my parents and my sisters, and um, of course, I'm really thankful for the chapters and seasons of relationship I've been able to grow with my parents. As a business owner, my dad moved us to Texas to pursue his business. As a father, obviously, they're fathers and mothers, and being able to relate with them and hear some stories of struggle that they were going through that I had no understanding of, because they, that was between them, and they were continuing to provide and serve for us. How has your upbringing affected your drive with your work and the way you just properly protect and serve your family financially, for your home roof? And then how has that impacted the way you teach your kids?
Man, that's such a good question. So I think that my father was a great example of how to work and how not to work.
Mm.
So I grew up in Minnesota, first of all, so no knock on Minnesota, but
Yeah.
Minnesota is kind of a place where we go back and time stands still. It's
Mm.
like over the last 8 years, not a whole lot has changed.
Yeah.
Because people don't leave Minnesota. You grow up, you die, you're in Minnesota, you work up the chain, and it's just kind of that. So it wasn't until we went to Texas where we realized, wow, there's a ton of opportunity in the world that we didn't realize was
Yeah.
available to us. Everybody's an entrepreneur down here. Our circle's all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got knocked off the horse a few years ago, I looked around, I was like, this wouldn't have happened to any of my own friends because they all built something that was
Yeah.
theirs. And so when we realized that, it was like, okay, things need to shift completely.
Mm.
So my dad, for the most of my childhood, was managing restaurants, and so there was no family balance there.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
he
yeah.
was in the grind all day, every day. My first job was when I was 14, getting paid cash as a busboy, working with my dad,
That's
and then
good.
I'd fall asleep. So La Cucaracha, the cockroach, name of the Mexican restaurant that he was managing, and the shift would get done, and then he'd be counting the till, and at the end of the night, and I'd fall asleep in a booth, and then he'd pick me up and take me home at like 11 o'clock at
Wow.
night. So it was grinding, and it was always
Literally.
work really hard. So my dad's from Venezuela, my mom's from Argentina. They
Mm.
moved here college age, and so have always just been grinding,
Yeah.
and it was very much stay in your lane, work hard, work up the ladder, get rewarded. My mom worked at the same company for like 25 years before she ever
Mm.
moved, and it was a forced move. So it was that mindset that was ingrained in me, and it was like, okay, dad's not going to be home for dinner. But I
Yeah.
knew that he was working. I knew that he loved me and that he was doing everything for our family, but he also wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mom was also working. So my grandma raised us while both parents were working, which was
Wow.
incredible. But that made our family stronger, but it also hurt a little bit. And it hurt
Yeah.
my picture of what work looks like. Right.
Mm.
So I come down here and my mind was blown. So much opportunity. So many of my friends were uber successful, started their own businesses. And I'm just looking up to these guys thinking, man, this is incredible.
Yeah.
It's one of those times where I realized, oh, not both people in the relationship don't have to work. There's opportunity where somebody could just be home and like manage the family, do the
Yeah.
thing. And there's a ton of respect for that, where in Minnesota, that was unheard of. So for me now, shifted back with this change in perspective and that background in my life, is how do I structure my business in a way where I can do both? Can I be super successful at home and in the office?
Yeah.
And I was never the kid that was like, oh, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be this. It was, I want to work hard. I want to be rewarded for my work. I want to be the best at what I do. Now it's
Mhm.
shifted like, hey, I want to be a really good dad. I want to be a really
Yeah.
good husband. I want to be successful. And success now looks like, can I go on trips? Can I give to the church? Can I do things? And also collect a paycheck.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's protecting that dream of being those things by
Yeah.
how I work.
Yeah. So would you say that, I mean, it sounds like you, of course, have a ton of love for your mom and dad, and you understand, even maybe more so now, the sacrifices they made to provide for your family. Um, how has that affected? I know you said your work, but then the way that you kind of shield or protect from the girls on how they view you with
Yeah.
how you work. Is that through intentional conversation? Is that just through just your literal presence of them being able to know, like, oh, I could call dad, or yeah, he could go do this with me, or I would, of course he's gonna be at my soccer game, like,
Right.
you know?
I think for us and our family, soccer games are family events. Like they're non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Like we're going to be there. And it's just being at all of those things. They know that I'm going to do that. Now, there are times where I say, hey, I'm sorry, dad needs to take a step away to go
course.
handle this business call. But I tell them that I'm doing it
Mm.
so that they understand he's not just leaving us. It's
Yeah.
not abandonment. It's he's doing this, and I tell them why I do it, and I share that with them. Like, hey, it was a really hard day
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
We're really intentional about having dinner as a family every night. We
Yes.
sit around the
That's
table
great.
and we talk and we go around, and it's really cute. I don't know where my kids got it from, but they came home one day and they're like, "Can we do rose thorn bush?" Have you heard of this before?
No.
Okay, so rose thorn bush is rose is the highlight of your day. Rose is like, this was beautiful, whatever it was. Cool, this was the best thing that
Dude.
happened
Okay.
today.
Let's see where this is going.
Thorn was, man, this thing stuck. Like it hurt. Like this thing happened
Yeah.
and it's tough. And then bush is something that I can work on. And so we'll go around the table and we do rose thorn bush. And obviously their stuff's hilarious. Like, oh, it was pizza at lunch. It was the best rose ever.
Yeah.
And thorn was like, oh, somebody did something and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really cool because, and I said it the other night as we were having dinner as a family. I was like, you know how rare this is? You know, that we're having dinner together at 5:30 when some people are still on the road. Like we're being intentional of having that dinner and sitting down and having those conversations.
Yeah. I mean, there's enough distraction just within all of our homes
Yeah.
like that, like could easily validate the reason to not sit down at the table and be intentional. And even with two young boys, 4 and 3, like one of my almost kind of like passive excuses is we had my father-in-law built us a beautiful kitchen table. We have 2 inchers and then bench seats. Getting those guys to
Yeah.
stay on their knees or sit down on the bench seats is like trying
Chaos.
to wrestle a crocodile. It's insane.
Well, boys and
So,
girls are so different too, man.
That's true.
Like I have so much appreciation
Yes.
for boys, but I couldn't do it. I'm a girl dad
Yeah.
through and through. I couldn't do what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I heard to kind of sum up what you just discussed with like the family time, the intentionality is presence, communication, and reason. You discussed like that, like your presence, the going to the soccer games, having family dinner, those are kind of non-negotiables. That's you making a statement without making a statement, if that makes sense. And then just your communication of y'all schedules, the things you guys have going on, you and your wife, you and the kids, extracurricular activities, work things coming up, loan things you need to go do. And then what I love there at the very end is the reason, being able to share with them the reason. I think, even Sophia shared with me, I tend to be sometimes hard on Jeremiah, my oldest, and I got to remind myself, like, he's only 4 years old.
Right.
He's so smart and so brilliant, but a lot of times it's me that gets going too much. And really, if I can just do those things really well, be present, be communicative with them, and really share that they're always asking, why? What's that? Where are we going? And being able to just have grace and patience in those moments is, I mean, it's an ongoing process.
Totally.
For
And
sure.
especially in a digital age, something I was really bad at and I'm still working on, but Taylor's been on me. Taylor's my wife.
Yeah.
No phones at the table. I mean, that's a house rule. Like we can't have our phones on us. And to me, it's like, I'm leaving it out there. How do I function
Do the
properly?
girls have phones yet?
No, they don't. No.
Okay.
So we're working on that. Lennon's going up to middle school next year, so it's going to be a little different. She's going to be away. We kind of feel like she's got a gizmo watch.
Yeah.
So she can make a phone call and she could text us, but that's it.
Interesting.
So we got her a Kindle and locked it down, all the parental controls and everything.
Yeah.
The only app that she really has access to on there is Kindle for reading and then the Bible app. And so she uses the Bible app as like social media. So she'll like make tiles that are Bible verses.
That's awesome.
Like she'll see people on there. I've got a friend who's on that app frequently.
Yes.
And she's like, oh, Mr. Ryan was on the Bible app again. It's pretty cool.
That's so cool. And so that's almost kind of in a way, maybe even like a creative outlet for her to like create that and create cool vision and stuff. That's super sweet. Or I want to ask another kind of verse here, something I've heard. And, I feel like another kind of phrase that we hear a lot is we learn from our mistakes, not our successes. I think we're super grateful for our successes, and hopefully as I continue to grow as an entrepreneur and a father and wisdom, also another phrase, the older we get, the more we feel like we don't know. Based off of kind of your transition when you made the jump, you're all in, like that's a big kind of gamble in a way. How would you kind of describe this learning versus earning? So sharing with someone that's kind of, again, in the grind and really adopting that, like, man, I've got to learn a ton through this process before I don't say earn the right to earn. And earning could also be, again, maybe defined as success, but like earning What? Like how would you describe that? How through your process have
Oh
you
man.
seen what have you learned and how has that really turned into earning in the sense of more time, more
Yeah.
freedom, quicker what's it? Quicker agendas or processes?
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of thoughts on that. So one
Okay.
is I mentioned my friend Ryan. So Ryan is a public speaker and author. He wrote a book called Chasing Failure,
Mm.
and he
I haven't heard
encourages
that.
failure. He's like, we celebrate failure in our house,
Yeah.
which
Heck
is
yeah.
really cool because if you don't take the shot nobody's going to take, then what's the point? If
Yeah.
you're constantly being safe, you're not going to learn anything. You learn from the failures.
Yes.
And I think the easy route for me, when everything went down a couple of years ago, I was offered several positions that made great money. And I thought,
Mhm.
cool, I could do that. That's the safe thing. And I'd be fine. And we wouldn't have gone through all the stress and difficulties that we've gone through over the last 2 years. It would have been
Yes.
easy. But somebody else would have owned it. I still would have worked for somebody else, and I could have been in a position again where I could get cut from work,
Mm.
right? I wanted to do it the hard way with every difficulty. The problem is the market tanked right when I did it, so it made it even more difficult than it
Eh,
probably should have been.
yeah.
But I took that path, and I've learned so much by doing that, where now the successes mean so much more. They're
Yeah.
sweeter because every bit of it has been earned. Every bit of
Yes.
it has been earned.
Yeah.
Nothing's been given. It's been built from scratch. And it's been a year or 2 years of planting seeds and now finally reaping rewards, which has been
Yes.
incredible. So I think there's something beautiful in that and going through those struggles. As far as what have I learned, I think as you start out, and you
Yeah.
probably feel this a little bit too, is there's there's imposter syndrome
Oh,
of, man,
dude, that will
am I
preach.
this person? Especially
Yeah.
because the way that I chose to get it out there was, man, I'm somebody who has been successful, knows my stuff. How am I going to get the word out quick enough? How am I going to cast the widest net? I'm going to put
Yeah.
myself out on social media and I'm going to just put my face out there. And then it
Yeah.
was, this thought in my head of, am I good enough to be the person who puts a video out?
Oh yeah.
And then people look at me and some of the comments, the messages that I get were just so
Really?
bad. And my wife would get defensive about it. She'd be like, why are they saying this
Uh,
about you? Or like, I remember there was one video where some guy was like, man, please never post a video again. Just quit.
what?
It's like, what? And he was like, this is the worst advice you could give anybody. And it was about how to pay your mortgage down quicker or something. And
Wow.
so there were a lot of learnings in that, like protect your heart. Obviously, there's just going to be,
Yeah.
the keyboard warriors out there that have an
Yeah.
opinion. But the flip side of that was I posted a video and somebody in London saw it, got over like 100,000 views. Somebody in London saw it. She set up time on my calendar through Calendly because I had all the systems set up
Yeah.
right. We set up a Zoom call
Love it.
and we met over Zoom about her moving to Texas. And I
Wow.
had that experience and I was like, okay, it's working. Like this
That's
is
crazy.
awesome. But fighting that imposter syndrome, man, that's just ego. It's
Yeah.
ego. And it's like, just do the thing. You're going to fail. 100% you're going to fail. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with it. And it's when you become okay with failure that you become successful.
Yeah. Dude, that literally leads like right into kind of the next verses I want to discuss was like the fear versus action. Going into the posture syndrome. I mean, if I'm being honest, like I still have it on a daily basis. It's I've shared this story before on another podcast. Being a boy dad, a huge movie that we love in our house. I don't know about y'all's house, is a movie called Luca.
Yeah.
The
We've watched
okay,
it.
yeah,
Yeah. The
so
girls like it. I
the
would say it's
two
top
buddies
5.
that are, I guess, like sea creatures, and then when they come out of the sea, they turn into human beings. And Luca gets out of the ocean for his first time, and his buddy's like, "Dude, just stand up." And like then he just falls, and he's like, "Well, just lean forward a little bit and put one foot in front of the other and catch yourself." And he does that, and he like closes that one eye, and then he catches his next step and his next step. And we were watching that a long time ago, and I literally looked at Sophie and I was like, that's my life.
Yeah.
Like that is building a business, building a family, trying to do anything outside of your comfort zone is just putting one foot in front of the other, kind of closing your eye, hoping that you catch yourself, and then you just take the next step and the next step. And I mean, it's just so ironic how quickly we forget that.
Yeah.
And we can watch a child and be so impressed and magnified on them taking their first step and so pumped. And then they start walking faster and then running. And there's so much celebration. And I think we forget to really celebrate those small steps and wins for ourselves.
We're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, why are we so hard on ourselves when
Yeah.
we should be celebrating those small wins because they are progress?
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I think we've chatted on just, the imposter syndrome and where to start, the successes versus the failures. But I think even still, and you might even feel this in a sense, going back to the social media, I love what you said. Even starting this podcast, like there's a lot of this kind of imposter or like passive vision in my mind of like, oh well, I want a lot of people to listen to this. Of course I do, but like I also want to do this coming down to the root of like I want to do it to be able to connect on a deeper level with the guests that I'm speaking with in person, and then in hopes that it creates a ripple that other people gain and see value from. Boom. That like just stop there.
Yeah.
Don't continue to go down this drive of like, oh, I wanted to look good on social media and all of those things, but just having it be a true passion. So if you could add in anything else there on people that are maybe just stuck where they're at, they maybe have a lot of fear, imposter syndrome feelings, feel like they're too far gone, like what continued advice could you give to just get them to take that first step, take some action, and just try?
That's good. So I teach a lot of social media classes just by what I do. And I
Really?
go out and I teach people how to do it and how to create things. And one of the things I tell people is the only person who shouldn't do social media is the person who has no friends. Because if you have at least one friend, you're going to find your people. You're going to find your tribe. You're going to find the people who are attracted to you. Obviously, there's going to be some jokers out there who want nothing to do with you, but they're not your people, right? So if you are dealing with imposter syndrome, doing the podcast, do I have something worth value to say that somebody would want to listen to? Somebody's going to want to listen to it.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to want to hear what you have to say because your unique perspective that you bring to the table is something someone else doesn't have. And sometimes it's exactly what they need.
Yeah.
So just do it.
Yeah, for sure. Just Nike.
Nike. Yeah, right?
For sure.
We're going to get
So I
fired
know
for
we
that.
talked at the beginning, child of God, husband, father, wealth builder. I wanted you to just share a little bit more because a lot of people may not understand the process of buying a home and all the different people. They see really nice, cool Instagram videos of agents walking through houses that are beautiful. And it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, I want to live there. But there's so much more behind scenes, which is kind of where you come in.
Yeah.
If you could touch on that and then touch a little bit on how you've kind of created this wealth builder. In my mind, I love following your content. I think it's great. You've added a lot of connection and education and inspiration through your posts, which, to me, I'm an audience to you, is it attracts me to be able to want to see more. Every time I see it, I know that it's going to be a well put together video or educational piece, but it's something that in most cases might be boring
Right.
to a normal person.
Wealth Builder has been a work in progress over the last 2 years. I think anybody who's a loan officer, you can do loans. It's not hard to do loans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little hard. There's some things you have to do, obviously, but
For sure.
it's a commodity and it can be just that. Like, it's almost like working out. There's a reason LLT exists, right? It feeds a certain clientele.
For sure.
If you want to just go work out at a gym, you can go work out at a gym. You can go to Lifetime, right?
Yes.
What you get through LLT is completely different.
Yeah.
Same with me. You're not going to just get a loan. You can if you want. If you wanted to come into LLT and say, hey, I just want to use your facilities, I'm sure somebody could.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bring the full value, right? So
100%.
Wealth Builder came about because I sat down with a realtor and I was like, hey, what's your thing? What's your typical clientele? He said, I built 31 millionaires. I was like, whoa. I've built 31 millionaires. I said, tell me more about that. What does that look like? Because nobody's ever said anything to me. He goes, well, I've worked with hundreds of clients, but I've built 31 millionaires because I took them through the process, if they were willing, of what that looks like. Here's how we're going to buy your first house, the minimum down. We're going to let you build equity. Then we're going to buy into the next one. Eventually, you're going to have 4 properties.
Yes.
And then we have a decision. Do those 4 properties pay for your 5th, or do we sell them all and go commercial?
Wow.
Right? He's like, and all of them that have come along that ride and say, yes, take me there, I've built 31 millionaires. I was like,
That's amazing.
that is a game changer for me. I want to be a wealth builder. I want to be a mortgage advisor and teach people what they didn't learn in school, because I didn't learn any of this until I really dove into it after the fact and started building people who are successful and have built wealth for their families. How did they do it? Through real estate. Obviously, they've done other things. They've built businesses. They've done other things. But if you want to focus on just real estate or have that be one of the legs to your wealth, How do you go about that? It's not just buying one house and living in it until you die. It's
Yeah,
not doing the Dave Ramsey protect your debt and play defense and stay there. There is risk, obviously.
for sure.
But if you're along for the ride, you're going to build some massive wealth.
Hmm.
And that is so fun when you get to explain that to somebody. And for the first time, they're thinking, wait, that's how it works. Or I
Yeah,
didn't know I could do that. Or how come nobody ever told me that?
yeah,
Like, because people don't. It's
yeah,
not just pick it off the shelf and do it. There's more to it. So that's where
yeah.
Wealth Builder comes from.
I love kind of the vision, and an analogy I always use is like the rock in the water and the ripple effect. You know, businesses can do business one of two ways. There's a lot of ways, but two very specific ways is I can have a client and build a relationship and then continue to add additional value and services. That's what you're doing, and there's return there as running a business. Come back to that. The second is I could just sell one thing and then I need to go find the next customer and sell that same thing again and then continue to find that
Right.
next customer. I think for you and for me, where I think there's definitely a lot of synergy, I could confidently say is that we have a desire to dig deep with relationships and continue to add value to people. I think some areas in business or some people within business or just outsiders could see that as a way to um, um, have greediness or take advantage. How would you kind of describe just that additional value? I think, of course, there's a heart piece behind
Yeah.
that, but just that, like you're building a deeper relationship, adding continued value, and of course, there's going to be a return, but that's not the main focus. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. I think a lot of people will look at individuals who provide a product or a service and think you just want my money.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, of course we do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Nobody works for free, right?
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
let's just call it what it is. Okay, but that's bucket one. That's low hanging fruit.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do we then set you up for success? Because ultimately, as a father and a husband, as a believer, I want to see you win.
Yeah.
Like there is nothing
For
better
sure.
than me seeing my clients win.
We want to see you win.
Yes. Yes, I'm going to benefit from it, right? But even if I didn't, it's fun to see people win.
Yeah.
And if my bills are paid and then everybody's winning too, huge.
Yeah.
That's the bigger thing for me.
That's awesome. I love that is so valuable. Like wanting to see other people win. That's so cool. And I think that's the same way with us wanting to train people and add value to them is like, yeah, we want them to move better and feel better, but we also want them to be confident in who they are, to not have pain, to feel good when they're picking up their grandkids that are continuing to get bigger and bigger
Yeah.
and get heavier. And there's so much more success or just internal joy that brings and seeing people win and accomplish things that they want to accomplish.
And you said picking up your grandkids, and it made me think of this video that I saw way back, and it was like this guy in the gym training every day. It was this grandfather, and
Yeah.
he's like picking up the weight and moving it. I don't know if it was a commercial or if it was a
I think I
video,
might know
whatever it
what you're
was.
talking about. Yeah.
But then at the end, it was like his grandkid's born, and he gets to pick up his grandkid for the first time. Like,
Yes.
as a trainer, that is the greatest joy. Like yes, you provided a service, you got paid, but you just helped somebody pick up their grandkid.
For
Like
sure.
that's an intangible benefit that you can't put value to.
Yeah.
Like it's insane.
Yeah, and that's kind of just, as you continue to stay in your lane with your work as a wealth builder and me as a fitness professional or concierge coach, like my desire is to do my best to try to see where they want to be and then kind of just reverse the steps that we're going to take. Like, similar analogy we always say is like brick by brick. Like the building's not built overnight. We got to do it one brick at a time. But it's the journey that we have to enjoy, not just the goal. Because if we're being honest, the pin always moves. Like
Right.
and we want it to move because we want to continue to set goals for us to try to win at. But man, it's that's huge and it's so important. And it's as I continue to grow older and hopefully wiser, I'm finding myself attracted to want to be around people that are like that because it just creates kind of a ripple.
Totally.
So
I think one of my coaches has so do a lot of coaching,
yeah,
obviously, and for different reasons and different things. But there's one coach who focuses on something he calls the high trust interview. And basically everybody has what is the low hanging fruit. Like say it's LLT. Why do you want to work out? Oh, I want a better looking body.
Yeah.
Or I want to lose weight. Okay, cool. Why? Okay, well, now that's a secondary question. How many levels deep can you go until you get to the real why? And the real why, going back to that same example, is picking up my kid,
Yeah.
right? Or picking up my future grandson
Yeah.
or whatever. And then you get to like, okay, we're no longer just working out so that you can up your weights. We're working out so that you can pick up a child.
Yes.
And those are two completely different things. And I think in business, we stop at number one. Like, cool, you want to up your weights. I'll give you that. And that's so cheap.
Yeah.
And it feels fake. And you're in it, you clock in, you clock out, you do your thing. And was that a successful day? No.
Yeah.
Am I working towards the actual why? Game changer. So I ask all of my clients the same thing. You want to buy a house? Awesome. Why? Oh, well, we want more rooms. Okay, why do you want more rooms? Well, we're actually trying to have a baby. Cool. Tell me about that. How's it been going? And then now it's an emotional connection of, okay, we're not just buying a house. I'm not just giving you a loan.
Yeah.
You're creating a family, and I'm going to help you get there.
Yes. Creating
Totally
depth.
different, right? Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that they might see, but it hasn't really like tangibly surfaced. And that then helps add a lot of drive and purpose for them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
To
totally.
like help continue to steer that ship, because you're going to be along with them, but like you're also not holding their hand through the whole process.
I'm definitely not there helping to make a baby.
Yes, exactly.
Let's call it what it is.
So true. Well, man, a couple other things I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. With your growth and as you've continued to navigate your entrepreneurial journey, how has networking and just connecting, I see you connecting with a lot of real estate agents and putting yourself out there. People, of course, need to know about you so they can work with you. You're building those relationships with them. But how has being proactive and networking added a lot of value, created opportunity, but then it also allowed you to offer value?
So, I mean, it sounds, what's the right word for it?
Cheesy?
It's relationships are everything.
Yeah.
It does sound cheesy. Relationships are everything. If you're building something, you need to take the approach of, I'm going to say yes to absolutely everything. If there's an event, whether you know it's for you or not, you go to it. So when I first started in business, I've shared a video on this before, but I had this gal who hired me. She was my boss / mentor, not a chosen mentor. Sometimes you have mentors you choose and some that are forced on you.
That's true.
So this mentor was like, hey, we're going to go to your first business event. Here's my tip of the day. I have 2 different pockets, one for business cards that you're going to keep and one's for that you're going to throw away. I was like, that is the worst business advice I've ever had in my life, because every one that I threw away was extremely valuable. And she was looking at the instant gratification, the instant win, who's going to serve me right now, rather than who can I serve? Because when you flip the mindset to who can I serve, then all of a sudden people start giving back to you, which is the weirdest thing. But be at everything, say yes to everything. Everybody's extremely valuable. And the more that you give, the more that you work for free, eventually it comes back tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of course, we would agree that there's probably some biblical, foundation there, of
100%.
course. But yeah, dude, it's not easy putting out free content or just going and building those, especially when you're literally spending time outside of your household when you could be back home with family or whatever. But it's just the belief that like you're trusting in the process and you're going to continue to water the seeds and hope that the roots come out of the ground.
You have to be so sold out on the goal and the dream and the promise to be able to do that, right? Like I was broke for 2 years, man.
Yeah.
And we won't get into the numbers, but I was broke for 2 years and finally starting to see the fruit of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sponsor this thing. I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to pay for gas. Just trusting the process and the promise. Like, God, you have this for me and I know it exists. Like, talk about wandering in the desert for 40 years, right? Like, bro, the promise is there and it exists. How am I going to get there? I'm just going to trust that it's going to happen. But you have to do that when you're starting out. Yeah. Like, I'm going to build X business, or I have this goal, or I'm going to hit this number, or whatever. Trust the process.
Yeah. That's huge.
And keep showing up.
Dude, for sure. Well, last question I've got for you. I've got this written down. Based off of who you are, what you've become, and where you're going, what are 2 to 3 key points or things that you could add value to the audience or give advice on?
I feel like we covered everything I was going to say to that. Yeah. But it is know that you're created for more than what you're doing right now. So take some time, do some soul searching, figure out exactly what your why is, and then chase that why. And the why is not always a number. The why could be a certain lifestyle. For me, that's what it is. It's what does success look like? It's this lifestyle. And that's what I'm chasing, and go after that. And then the other takeaway is, as you're an entrepreneur, it's very easy to become busy, and you're busy doing all of the wrong things. And you get to the end of the day and you think, with what I did today, did I move the needle? Did I move my business forward? Did I do the thing? And when I first started out, I didn't have actionable items that I could look back on every day to figure out, did I move the needle? So now I have things that, hey, I can't leave the office until these things are done. When this is done, it was a successful day. Yeah. Even if everything else was chaos, if everything else fell apart, if I accomplished these two things, was it a successful day? Can I sit down at the dinner table with my wife and my kids and say, hey, today was a good day?
And do your rose, your thorn, and your bush.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
That's it. Rose, thorn, bush.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on to the Proper Form podcast. I had a great conversation. I hope you guys really gain a lot of value from this. Jonathan, one last thing. Where can people find you? We'll put your description and some bios of your social media platforms, but where can people find you?
A-List Lender, because that's just what we went with. But A-List Lender on Instagram is the easiest way to find me. You can Google me. You'll see my reviews. Cool. Get a hold of me. All of my information's there. But awesome. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for hosting.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys listening to the Proper Form podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.